I know you wouldn't.
I would give it back to you.
Mr. Sustainability.
And it would probably save $350,000 or $400,000. And it's, I mean, it's just one of these odd things that you have to think about. It would be better for us to take the fine than to pay for health care. Now, the question is, how long could that really work in the nation if everybody chose to do that without there being a subsequent increase in Medicaid, Medicare costs that you would then pick up, within 2 years? And all of a sudden you realize that you really didn't add any savings in the long term. It was at best a short-term fix and it really didn't produce anything. So I would argue this is the worst. That there's some combination or permutation that's different than this. So if you just do this, if you just say, we will collect the same amount of money that we did last year and that we're estimating to collect this year, and that's $10 million. And then what happens is we balance all the way out to 2015. If we collected over the next 4 years what we collected last year, what we anticipate we will collect this year, then our deficit, our need to balance our budget, while we end up with these years as a negative, you have time to plan for those years. But if in the conservative world, it's more like 9.5, and we'll see this as we get to June and July, and you can kind of see what it looks like at the halfway point, then the discussion becomes a little different. You adjust these figures up here, but I will tell you that I have employee costs which are basically a 1% growth in salaries on an annual basis over the last 5 years, and a 1% growth in fringe benefits. And my fear is that fringe benefit costs, while we think we can contain them, I think we've done a really good job over the last 5 or 6 years. I don't know that we can contain them to the same level. The one thing that is not in the new healthcare plan is any cost containment measures whatsoever. So there's nothing that really controls premium increases that can be passed on. The other thing that I think slips people's minds is that insurance companies are regulated at the state level by state insurance commissioners. And just listening to state insurance commissioners try to figure out how to make sure that insurance companies are solvent when all of a sudden they have to book liabilities that they've never had before, like pre-existing conditions. They don't know who's coming to them and they don't know what their future costs are, so they have to try to anticipate how many, out of 100 people that come to us, how many are going to have conditions that before we didn't have to pay for, but now we do. So how do you book that liability, that future loss? And nobody knows how that's going to be done. We had a really good speaker at the Kansas Association of City Managers that talked about it. I will tell you, they're as uncertain at the state level in terms of how this is all going to be administered as anybody else, in terms of what is their role as they go forward. So that's the forecast. I will spell out all of these assumptions that are made. They're very limited growth assumptions. It's basically saying you have to hold your expenditures down. You have to look at your transfers and figure out how you reduce those even further over time. I'm not sure that this number is high enough. I grew it at 7.5%. I doubled what we did this year, tried to catch up. Luckily, we had purchased a lot of new trucks in our public works fleet. They tend to last 10 to 15 years. We're hoping that them being stored inside, they last 15 to 20 years. That's been the experience in Marion, where they built basically the same facility, increased the life of their vehicles by about 20 to 25%. If we can get that, well then that helps that out quite a bit. When you look at those things that we can control on the employer side, there's really two things that we can control. One is health insurance and one is workers' compensation. And you control health insurance by, one, every 2 or 3 years bidding it out. 2, increasing the contributions that employees make. If you remember 2002, it was 100% city paid for employees. And then when I came in 2003, I endeared myself to the employees by telling them they got to make a 5% contribution, and then we were going to increase it by 1.5% every year.
We did that.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to make the recommendation.
You would have hit me.
Yeah, so we've increased it. So you increase contributions, you bid out the insurance, you change the plan benefits, you do everything you can in order to contain that cost. What we're paying for, the net cost to the city in 2011 is $30,000, $24,000 less than what we paid in 2007. So we've done our best to contain that cost. In workers' compensation, it's a function of three things. It's the cost of health care, it's the experience in terms of your workers and the type of injuries that they have, and it's the type of injuries that your people have, and the classes of employees you have and how those classes are rated in terms of how dangerous they are. In 2009, we switched from KMIT to CARET, and we received about a $15,000 savings, and then we went into their safety program, and then we dropped it another $20,000, and it's gone up another $6,000, but there comes a point that the pressure of the health insurance moves over to the workers' comp side. If you've ever had a health insurance claim, like when I split my finger on the root beer bottle on New Year's Eve night, I got 2 letters asking me, was this an accident?
Root beer bottle. Right. Mr. Scanlon.
He's on tape.
Yeah.
It was root beer.
Yeah, it was. I got 2 letters on, did this, where did this occur? Did it occur at work? And the pressure from the insurance companies, both on the healthcare provider and on the employer, is to make sure that there are no insurance claims that should be handled through workers' compensation. That if you tweaked your back, is this really health insurance or did you tweak your back at work? And so what happens is the pressure is to push as many things as you can to workers' compensation. On the workers' compensation side, guess what they're trying to do? Push as many things over to the health insurance side. And eventually what we're all going to figure out is that it's better just to put them both together. You just pay an insurance claim, it's either occurred at work, occurred at home, it really doesn't matter, because it's the same body or group of people that are making the premium payments. Those costs we can control, those 2. Things we can't control, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, there is no way the current contribution rates that we have for Medicaid, Medicare, which is 1.45%, which has not changed, I believe, for 20 years, can continue given the fact that those systems are terribly underfunded. Now, the good news is the city side only has to pay half of it, and the employee has to pay the other half of it. The problem is, it's not a cost we get to pick. It just comes out, and we get to pay it. CAPERS, KPNF, there's all kinds of legislation moving through both the Senate and the House in terms of modifications to the plan. We have a CAPERS Plan 1, a CAPERS Plan 2, and we're about ready to get a CAPERS Plan 3, and then we have a 401 contribution plan they want to go to. The problem with all of these are they're not solutions to the unfunded liability that they have. They're talking about kicking the can down the road. The state of Kansas in 1993 knowingly reduced their contribution to CAPERS. You can't make up for 18 years of underfunding a pension system in a year, or 2, or 3. It was suggested around 1999 that CAPERS at least allow employees to have a higher contribution rate into the system, so that at least there's some additional capital that's coming into the system and paying for it. And I think the fear was that there would be a class action suit because it would look like that the state had shifted their responsibility. There's a whole bunch of federal laws that get wrapped up into this in terms of the contributions that were made. There was a great story in the last League magazine where I think Glenn Deck points out in 1993 is really when this started to go awry. And it really hasn't been fixed since then. There's been attempts made to fix it, and of course, this all gets exacerbated when you have a decline in the stock market and when things become more difficult in terms of investments that you can make as a pension system. I mean, all these things just start compounding. So those are my slides. I wanted to say the last 15 or 20 minutes The one thing that I always tell staff is that we can show you a forecast. We can tell you where we think revenues are. We can tell you what expenses to expect. We can even show you how to keep the growth in the expenditures down. But in the end, the only way you keep the growth in expenses down in the general fund to make it balance is that you have to look at your personnel, because it's your biggest cost. And it's, since you're a service organization, that's the only place you get real savings. And one of the things that, that over the last 25 or 30 years, and I've done this in 4 different cities, the best time to talk about the budget is not when you're in the budget. It's almost the worst time to talk about the budget because everybody's trying to get to the end. And all you have to do is watch the state of Kansas and the race to the end that they're trying to produce, in a month. And by the way, they have 200 different appropriation amendments trying to make their budget balance, and it doesn't.
Isn't that the biggest hazard of being too conservative on the revenue number? I mean, picking 9.5 million.
Yeah.
I mean, if 65% of the budget is tied up in people, and we're going to put 9.5 on the wall, that's the number. I mean, we're making the decision in advance, we're cutting people.
Yeah. I don't see really any good alternative to what we have. And I think the thing that sort of gets missed, this is our operating budget. And I think the thing that I hear, and it's disappointing, and I try to educate people when I can, because they'll talk about their tax bill, and their tax bill's $500 or $600. And I said, if you just took Overland Park's tax bill and you took that portion which relates to operations, and you took their mills, you took our mill, you didn't take the stuff that we pay for solid waste, because in Overland Park, a resident has to pay for solid waste on their own. You started just comparing the operating components. Well, in Overland Park, it's $153 a year for a resident, and in Mission, it's $176 a year for a resident. Most of the other portion of our tax bill is all in infrastructure. And I think the thing that we miss in sort of our narrative about our budget and really about our community is in 2004, the county said, you have a big floodplain. And by the way, there's no way that you can change it, even though we tried to. It's a combination of elevations. It's a combination of where things were built. It's about $54 million in terms of the improved property that's there. And you need to fix it in order to, to basically, otherwise you're going to have, everybody's going to have flood insurance in this area. And the single biggest property in the floodplain was the mall. And the other part that kind of goes missing is that I always have to kind of laugh when people say, well, the mall was, I love the mall. There was nobody there. That's the problem. That's the problem. And the other thing that's missing is Tom Valenti purchased a portion of that mall deed in lieu of foreclosure, meaning that mall was about ready to be foreclosed on by the insurance company that owned the note on it. It was not a viable entity. It was about ready to be boarded up. So he bought it. We told him, great, you're the winner. You own a piece of property that's in the floodplain. He knew that. He knew that there would need to be repairs in order for that structure to be built. He would have to, the floodplain would have to be removed. And so what happens is, we're trying to remove big chunks of the city from the floodplain, so we're investing in infrastructure. So when you look at our property tax bill, and I think it was Dave Conrad that pointed out in an email, you can actually see the debt that we issued. And those payments that we're making in taxes to infrastructure, they show up as assets on our balance sheet. I mean, we built $35 million worth of improvements and purchased land. I mean, you can go find it. And so what happens is everybody thinks that their tax bill is paying for operations when our operating component of the property tax bill is really, it's only $23 higher than Overland Park. And there's no, Overland Park's so below everybody else that if you're even in spitting distance, no one's really close. So